Welcome everyone to the Montessori Family Life webinar series. So glad to see you all here today and to have you on our broadcast. I see Cassie, we're glad you're here. All right, and also Jonathan and Cheryl. We're glad if you are returning. We are very happy if you are a new person. I saw that we had about 10 new people sign up this week for this webinar. So we're going to try to make it really good for you guys. Our topic for today, how to get more than a one-word answer from your child, engaging in meaningful conversations with children. I have three of my colleagues with me today. I have Cheryl Allen, who is a member of the Montessori Foundation staff. She works with me on the Montessori Foundation Family Network and other things in the foundation works. We have lots of things going on, so we usually dabble in many things. Cheryl has also been a Montessori teacher for a long time. She was a decade at Newgate School, the Montessori Foundation's lab school. She also grew up in Montessori herself, and she has two children who are now in college, both of them. And then we have Jonathan Wolf, who is part of the Montessori Foundation crew. He is an educational consultant. He's an author. He is a conference presenter and an adult educator. And we're glad to have you with us today, John. And then we have Cassie Mackey, and she is, I think she must be part of the foundation too, because she's around us a lot. Cassie was a principal of a Montessori charter school in Arizona for many years, several decades, and has now gone into some private practice. She's doing educational consulting. She does present at conferences for Montessori and other things, and has a wealth of knowledge and experience about children and families. So Cassie, we're glad to have you with us today also. So let's go ahead and get started. I will go to the first slide. Let me see. There we go. What we wanted to talk about first was really, what is your role as a parent in this whole idea of conversation with our children? You know, what are the things that we as parents need to do in order to hopefully help open up the communication between parent and child? So we're going to go ahead and talk about these 4 bullets. Anyone want to start with the first one?
I'll start with right now, especially if you're working from home at all, being fully present seems really difficult. Like your kids or your parenting partner want to talk to you when you're doing work or you're doing something else. So just being able to say, I need to finish this for work, or being able to really focus on one thing at a time, I feel like is more, it needs more practice every day in our society. So this is a really great chance to practice and to then role model for your children to take that time and focus. So be off your phone, don't have the TV on. Some things I feel like doing dishes might be easier to have a conversation sometimes, but things that don't take your mind away.
Absolutely.
And even if you are doing dishes and your children are trying to speak to you, you can ask them, you can say, hey, listen, I'm going to start getting dinner ready, or I'm going to do dishes. Do you mind if I do this while we have this conversation? That way they feel honored and respected, and they're usually okay with that. And they're more apt to start speaking to you during those times.
I think also the other part of being present as a parent, I wasn't always successful doing this, is being present is also being positive or clear about, you know, am I superimposing any of my own frustrations or disappointments or anxieties about, you know, my life or my child on my child? So I think it's so easy to walk into a conversation with a child and not actually be aware that we have sort of a hidden emotional agenda. And
Yeah.
children pick up on that. And then as soon as they pick up on the adult's either frustration or anxiety or disappointment, they shut down. So I think we really need to do an emotional check-in to be present.
And
Yeah,
this
so
also,
in other words, being present means being there and being able to fully listen, you know, and to put everything else aside, including, as Jonathan said, maybe some tucked back emotional baggage that we have with us. And if we feel that, then we say, okay, wait a minute, I got to get rid of that so that I can really hear and see what this child is, what we're trying to communicate here. Cassie?
Oh, go, Cassie, you go first.
no, go ahead, John. It's okay.
Well, it occurred to me as Lorna was just saying, the other side of that emotional coin is sometimes it's important that we actually consciously express our feelings to our children, not to
Mhm.
make them feel bad. It's not, you did this and you made me feel this way, you know, as a parent. But I am feeling very frustrated now because we did have a talk about you not hitting your little sister or not throwing those things in the living room or whatever the issue is. So I think there is a time to put the emotional baggage aside to really, as Lorna said, really listen and observe our children's needs. And then there's a time for an authentic expression of, this is how I'm feeling as a member of our family, and I want to share this with you. But it needs to be a conscious sharing of emotions and not an acting out of emotions by the adult.
Right, absolutely,
What
absolutely.
I was going to say is communicating with your child starts when they are babies, when they're inside of you. And so you want to really cultivate that communication so that when you have to have those tough conversations, especially when they become teenagers, you've already established this pattern and this respect between you and your child.
Absolutely. And Cassie, that's one of the reasons that we chose the photo that we have here on this slide, is because, you know, obviously when your baby is brand new and you know, you're there and you're so happy and excited, and by the way, they can't talk yet, so you can. That's an easy time, but it is the time to start really talking to your baby, you know, and you'll be surprised. They don't talk with words, but before you know it, they'll start to smile, gurgle a little bit, or, you know, coo a little bit. And that's their conversation, you know, so watch for those things. And it is important to have those conversations from the very beginning. Thank you, Cassie. Let's go to the next one. Be honest. This is a really important one, and I think that honest means be who you really are. I think we do have to be careful to remember that we also need to talk to children about things that are age appropriate. Sometimes we as adults forget or are leaning on our children for some reason, you know, and we share things that are things that they don't either understand or aren't ready to be able to handle right at that age or time. And so we need to be really careful and conscious about age appropriate conversation.
But at the same time, it's really important that you give them some information, especially if they're anxious about something.
Yes.
So when they're in the dark and they're not quite sure and they're hearing conversations in the background and they feel it in their bodies that something's not right, it's important that you do give them some information so that they feel that they are obviously part of the family, they understand that they're still safe, and they're able to kind of dispel that anxiety a little bit.
Just a little case study about what Cassie just shared. I was at a Montessori school in California doing a consultation the day after 9/11, or maybe the week after 9/11. And parents were really struggling with how much information to share with their children of different ages, you know, given what was going on, because it was all on the news and kids were seeing images of towers falling and, you know, all that kind of stuff and towers burning. And I walked outside the school, and there was a 4-year-old child standing outside this Montessori school in California, looking up at an airplane that was probably 15,000 feet in the sky. And this child turned to me with great anxiety, and this child didn't even know me, and said, "Is that plane going to crash into the school?" So to me, it was just really hit home. It's like, we really have to be careful. Is this the right amount of information at the right time to share? And I will say, if something comes up and you're not quite sure what to say or what to share, talk with your child's classroom teacher. Montessori teachers are really trained to understand, at this age, this is what this child can take in this way. And most of us parents don't know that. They don't, as they say, the children don't come with owner's manuals. So check in with the Montessori teacher, and they'll give you some really good sense of how much to say and what to say about a particular issue.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to speak on honesty. It's just not in what you say, but it's how you present yourself as well. Kids know, they can feel if you're really truly listening, if you're really trying to connect with them, or if you're just, trying to get other things done and they're just, talking in your ear. They need to feel that kind of authentic connection to you. So be honest with your time and with your attention to them, because they'll see it in your eyes, in your face, in your body, in the tone of your voice. So really be careful when you're having those conversations with your children.
Just a quick piece of brain research again on just to build on what Cassie said, and this is with all age children, but certainly with what Montessori called the first plane of development, which is 0 through 6 years old. Their big cognitive part of their brain, the frontal lobes, are not fully operative yet. And what is really operative is the limbic or midbrain, which is the brain that picks up on emotions. And so when we're giving information to a child, but our underlying agenda is, I'm really angry at you, or you should feel ashamed of yourself, they're not actually getting the information a lot of times. What they're getting is the feeling and the emotion of the adult, and that's where damage can be done. The child feels demeaned or disrespected or incapable. So, and this is true of all age children, but it's especially important with young children that they get the energy that the adult loves them, respects them under all conditions, may not like what they did, their behavior, but respects them as a person.
Absolutely. All right. Let's go to the next one. Be observant. What kinds of things should parents be looking for when they're trying to have a conversation and communicate with their children? What things would a parent observe, or might a parent observe?
Well, one is environmental. Is this the right time and place to have the conversation? Or is there music playing? Is there a television on? Is the child in the middle of a video game? Are there other people talking? So before we even observe the child, it's like, if I really want to have a meaningful conversation and invite this child to share something that's in their heart and mind, is this an environment that helps the child really focus in on us and themselves and me as a parent? We're very attentive to that in a Montessori classroom. When we give a lesson, teachers pick specifically the place in the classroom that will optimize the child's engagement or concentration. I think it's important for parents, if we want to get meaningful feedback from our children, is to look around and go, is this really the right time and place to do this? Or is it just too distractible an environment?
Yeah.
And a lot of the times the children will lead you to the right time. So you might notice when you're putting them to bed, oh my gosh, they all of a sudden become chatty. This is when they're divulging their deep, thoughts and secrets to me. Or it might be when you're outside playing catch, or it might be when you're taking a walk. So be observant as to when your children start just kind of revealing their day to you. And that's when you need to maximize that time with them.
Absolutely. And Cassie, I was thinking too, sometimes parents, because we're very busy, lots of things to do, places to go, people to meet, all that stuff. We think that it's probably a good time to chat with our children when we're driving the car. And I really have to say, I don't think that's a great time. It seems like it ought to be, because there you are in the car and, so forth. But really, you're not being fully present. First of all, at least I hope you're not, because you really need to be fully present on on the traffic, you know. Um, and usually you're not facing your child. You don't have eye contact. You don't have, you know, you don't have those connections that really are part of human communication. It's one of the reasons that texting is not a great way to communicate anything that's emotional, because you can't hear the person and you can't see the person. And so when you're driving a car, you know, you should be looking straight ahead. And so, or to the, you know, to the sides and stuff. So really be careful about that, because I think we sometimes get confused and think, oh, well, this is a good time. You know, we're both together and there's nothing else we could be doing. Well, driving the car, but so pay attention to that one.
And a
You know,
lot of times parents, when kids hop in the car right away, it's, how was your day? What did you do today? Blah, blah, blah. You know, you want to gather all this information, and just think about when you come home from work, sometimes you just need some downtime. You need the day to kind of consolidate in yourself. And so when you're kind of barraged with all these questions, it's kind of hard to come up with an answer. So by all means, if they start talking, great, but that's probably not a great time to ask that question. And then the kids will know that, oh, it's not until we get home and I'm having a snack and we're sitting down talking, that's when I can share my day, or whenever you decide to have that conversation.
Sure. And I know some parents that have really observed their children and realize, you know, when they get in the car after school, they're so hungry, you know, and so they often will bring snacks that the children can eat in the car, or they actually park their car and they take their children onto the playground, if that's okay at the school that you're at, and just sit down and have a little snack and just kind of let the day, as Cassie said, sort of settle. And then the conversation will often begin to roll.
one other aspect to this, which is very similar to what everybody is sharing, is, and I sometimes made this mistake as a parent. Are there times where either we as adults are not completely centered, you know, we're not completely present, or because our children are going through something emotionally or behaviorally, and in the midst of that sort of battle of self-control of the child and the adult, what do we try to do? We try to teach a lesson. Let me give you some information about what to do. That's not a teachable moment. That's what I like to call a behavior management or a self-control moment for both the adult and the child. So just sometimes it's just good to ask ourselves, is this really a teachable moment when my child and I am thoroughly present to share some information with my child in some form? Or is this just a moment where I need to help myself and my child calm down and recenter? That's a management moment.
Yeah, and again, that's all about observing, excuse me, observing yourself and your own emotions, and also observing your child and what they look like, how they're moving their bodies, what their facial expressions are. Those are going to give you hints, and so those are things that you want to pay attention to and look for to assess whether this is a teachable moment or not. Okay, let's go to be responsive rather than reactive. This is tricky for some of us.
If kids are giving you things that happened at school, especially younger students, they're giving you information, they may want your empathy or your sympathy, but if you react, and you might not be reacting to the right thing. I remember a parent coming in and totally up in arms because one child had yelled at her child, and I said, did you read the note we sent home, like the communication we sent home? No, but she told me all about it. I said, okay, did she start with the fact that she and her friend were arguing and she hit her? And her friend yelled, "Don't hit me," like, because that's important information for their reaction. And none of it was that it was okay, but if the parent had responded, the child just wanted empathy, that they had not gotten along with their friend, that they hadn't managed that interaction well. And instead they got this reaction that, or I got lots of attention. And dad came to school with me, and it wasn't what was needed. But
So,
it's difficult.
so if the goal in, let's say, redirecting our child's behavior to something that's more responsible, respectful, responsive when they do things that are, childish, which children do, because they don't have our experience and they don't have our self-control, is, do we really try to understand what the child's unmet need or lack of skill is that's being responsive to? What does my child need to make some better choices? Or am I jumping to judgment, immediately going, that was it, really inappropriate behavior? And yes, it was inappropriate behavior, but if the first thing they hear out of my mouth as a father or a mother, that was really inappropriate, or I'm very disappointed in you, that's a reactive statement of judgment. And so judgment does not help a child. They need to understand how their behavior impacted themselves, the community, other people. But when we come across quickly with a judgment that is sort of playing God, this was inappropriate, I'm really disappointed in you, it really shuts children's brains down. They are not then open to learning at all because they frankly feel shamed.
Yes.
Yep.
And it goes,
Saying, oh, sorry, Cassie, although we're both saying younger students, we need to know that it's 10 times, 100 times more for teenagers. And
Yep.
that often they'll tell you about their friend looking for your reaction. And not to say that they're lying, but they'll, my friend dyed her hair purple. Oh, that's a horrible thing to do. Well, they're not going to come to you with changes they want to make or concerns about their body. Whereas if you say, oh, how do they feel about that? Or it's something, it's more often about seeing what your reaction is than the actual information.
Yep.
what I was going to say too is when John was talking about judgment on your child, it's also what Cheryl was kind of saying, judgment on the children that they're having concerns or issues with. So a lot of times parents will create victims and villains and in their children's story. And that's never helpful for your child or for the other children, especially when they're teenagers, because they're going to love and hate people within an hour. And so you have to kind of manage that. And they might want you on board to agree with you about not liking one of their friends, but the next day they're going to get mad at you because you don't like them because they love them again. So that's where you just have to be neutral. And the one thing you have to do is acknowledge their feelings at the time. Make sure you acknowledge their feelings. It doesn't mean you need to agree with them, get on the bandwagon with them, but just to acknowledge how they're feeling at that time. Then, as John said, kind of figure out what that developmental need is and how you can meet that need for your child.
Yeah, see, I really appreciate you talking about the, making children inadvertently feel like they're the victims or they're the villain, by our quick reaction. And certainly that has a very dynamic effect upon teenagers. But I want to remind us all that children between 0 and 6 years old, according to developmental psychologists, are in the process of developing their character and personality. So you're not going to get an adolescent reaction from a 5-year-old, but a 5-year-old hears an adult say, so that person did that to you, they're a bad person. Or when you do that, you're a bad person. It's beginning to seed those seeds in their personality development of like, I'm either good or bad person, which is really not where we want children to go. It's like, I want to evaluate my behavior. Was it helpful or hurtful? But not the idea of like, some people are good and some people are bad. So I would also suggest, even with the very youngest children, we want to stay away from that kind of villain victim language. It's not good for their healthy development.
Absolutely, John. That's such a great point. And Cassie too. I think we also need to remember too, that sometimes children aren't actually looking for us to join in the conversation. Sometimes they're just wanting somebody to listen And so sometimes our role is just that of being a listener. Now, you might validate feelings, but mostly you're just going to listen. And I can tell you, when Ellen, my daughter, was about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, it was in the evening, and she was thinking about the next day of school. She had been thinking about it. She was in her bedroom, and she came out into the living room, and she said, she was all upset. She was like, Mom, you gotta, I just don't know what to do. I wanted to wear the blue dress tomorrow, and the blue dress is in the laundry. And she went on and on. And I thought, oh, and I took a deep breath, and I just went, oh. And then she talked some more. Well, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know if I have to do the laundry. I don't know if I'm gonna have to wear a different dress. And I went, And then she talked some more about things, and she kept going on. My daughter is a very verbal sort of person. So she went on, and it seemed like for quite a long time, and very upset. But I just kept going, oh, huh, what else? And finally, she went, Mom, I think I'm just going to have to put the blue dress into the washer and then get it out and do the dryer, because I really want to wear that dress to school tomorrow. I said, oh, is there anything else? Do you need help with that? No, I'm okay. But, she really didn't want me to solve that problem for her. She didn't want me to be the fixer.
Well, Lorna, you're really asking a really profound sort of educational character development outcome question. Do we want our children to just hear the right answer and do the right thing, or do we want them to be problem solvers? I mean, ask yourself, what's most important? And if we constantly tell them what to do and give them the right answer, you might win the battle of that issue right there. But are we really helping them be reflective people, introspective people, self-aware people? And what Lorna did with her daughter was helping her, by not stepping in and giving a quick didactic answer, allowed her daughter to solve the problem, which is a much greater gift than the answer in the moment.
Yeah, okay. Listen, we have Jean-Paul, and Jean-Paul says, let me see if I can read it, everybody. It says, I love and agree with this 4 points for this role of the guardian/parent. I feel all families develop a certain culture of how and when to have conversations, dialogues, rather than just brief monosyllabic interactions with their children. It's important to provide the environment for serious conversations. Thank you, Jean-Paul. That's a good insight for us. All right, folks, as usual, we're going to be thinking we need to hurry up. We may actually be doing what we need to do in a couple of these slides. We're doing it ahead of time. So here's our next one. One of the things that we felt as a team that was important to talk about in this discussion about communication and conversations with children is we need to take a look at our intentions when we are about to go into a conversation, or even if we've started it and we haven't quite checked on that, we should take a moment and do that. But what's our intention for this conversation? Do we want to relate to the child, or do we want to interrogate? And the second one is similar, and we'll talk about how they are related to each other, these two bullets. Do we want to connect with our child, or do we want to get information? And not that one is more important than the other, it's just, why are we having this conversation? What is the goal? What is the outcome maybe that we hope for? So let's talk about that a little bit, folks.
Well, one of the things we talked about just a moment ago before we started, Lorna, is the idea of, like, even though these are interrelated, it's not an either or, like Lorna said. If we lose the trust or the child's comfort level, if we lose the relationship feeling between parent and child, we're not going to get the information. So I think there's a certain sequence to these, even though they're inextricably interlinked, that if children are not comfortable with us, or they're feeling interrogated, or they're feeling the adult agenda is like, I just want to see if my tuition dollars are well spent today. So what did you learn? You know, they're gonna pick up on that, and we're gonna lose the connective tissue, and then we're not gonna get anything. So I think there is a certain sequence or foundational element to these sets.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
And a lot of what we've already discussed has to do with observing, has to do with picking the right time and the right place. And all of that has to do with relating and connecting, you know. So I agree with you, John, that, you know, we really do have to think about relationship first, and then what other things might come after that.
And there's a time and place for gathering information and to interrogate or try to, necessary questions for certain things. But sometimes when you interrogate, it breaks down trust, because the kids start thinking, do they not trust me in this? Do they not trust the teacher? Why do they keep asking me questions about the teacher? Do they not trust my school? And it kind of puts these seeds of doubt in them. And so then it kind of takes their confidence away. So really think to yourself, is this information that I need to gather from them, or is it information I need to get from the teacher, from the school, or from another parent, whatever that looks like. So think about how that just plants little seeds of doubt and withers away that trust.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another aspect of that, Cassie, and Lorna alluded to this when she talked about, interrogating while trying to drive, or trying to drive. It's if we try to get information from children about let's say what they've done in school or what happened in school on the fly, that's not really intentional. To go back to one of the things that Lorna has spent so much time talking about in these broadcasts, which is the family meeting. So what if there was a time in the day or a time in the week where the entire family was invited, meaning every verbal member of the family was adults were invited to share. So what was one fun thing that you did, or one really challenging thing, or one problem that you solved? And so now you're creating an intentional time for everyone, not just the child, to share what's going on in their lives, which is different than, while we're walking out from the school. So what did you do today? That's not intentional, and you're not going to get much of a response.
Absolutely.
And sometimes your response is misrepresented. They don't understand. I know when my son was about 5, I broke my foot stepping on one of his toy trains, and he went to school and told his friend Adam, and Adam told his dad. And I'm sure what happened was Adam's dad picked him up and he said, "How was school?" And Adam said, "Braden's mom got run over by a train." I've always given his dad credit. He just said, "Oh, I hope she's okay." And he said yes. And so when I saw him a few days later, he was like, "Wow, I knew something was wrong with that, but I felt like I didn't really need to go there." Like, he just took the information and was like, I'll figure this out later.
I just had this image, Cheryl, of this dad looking at you going, "Where are the rail marks on her body? I don't see any rail marks."
You look pretty good for being hit by a train.
That's exactly what he said to me when he saw me.
Oh my goodness. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. Let's see if we can. There we go. We wanted to talk a little bit about how conversations change as children grow. And so we're going to quickly just go over this one and go to the next ones. Birth to 6, everything is all about me. They really don't know how to have a two-way conversation yet. And that's a really strong learning period for them. 6 to 12, they're wondering why, and they're using their imaginations a lot. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then from 12 to 18 years old, the adolescents, they're trying to just figure out, how do I interact with others? It's not that they don't know how to have a dialogue, it's just that they're not quite sure of how to relate, and particularly when we think about gender, you know, boys and girls and boys and boys and girls with the hair and the makeup and the stuff. So they're trying to just figure out how to interact with each other when they're thinking about conversations and that sort of thing. So let's go to this slide where we can actually go a little more in depth about birth to 6. What is that? Is their question. They want to know what is that? And they're very, very concrete thinkers. You know, they take things literally. So when you say things, be very careful about what you're saying, because they will take whatever you say literally.
Well, and they're also what we call in Montessori sensorial. They use their senses and movement to learn. So is there a difference between a parent saying, when you need to respect your little sister, even when she touches your toys? That doesn't help a preschool child very much, because it's like, respect my little sister when she touches my toys. What does that mean? What we do in a Montessori classroom is we actually do a role play, and literally the adults will go, please don't touch my toys. These are my toys. Please, or show how I'm going to move my toys out of the way. We actually do an enactment of the prescribed behavior. That's what we mean by concrete. It's not an abstract commentary on the behavior. It's an actual acting out and modeling of the behavior, so the preschool child sees, oh, this is the movement involved and this is the language involved in a better response.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at this age, they remember everything. I think we don't give them enough credit for that. So if you say we can have a cupcake after lunch, you need to add today, unless you plan to have a cupcake after lunch every time they
Good. 70 years old.
I still expect a cupcake after lunch every day.
Oh my goodness.
You know?
Now, the other thing that we have here is the bullet on transitioning from actions to words. Remember that these children are in the stage where they began at birth with no words. So the way that they communicated was through sounds, crying or fussing or grunting, or by actions. They would, if a little one doesn't know how to tell you they want a cookie, they'll run over to the table or where the cookie jar is, you know, rather than saying, I'd like to have a cookie, because they don't have those words. So these children at this time in their life are really learning that words have a lot of power, that words can get you things that maybe your actions can't, or are better said. And so this is a very important thing to remember about birth to 6, the whole period.
Just a quick piggyback on that. How many times, and I was at fault as a parent and even as a Montessori primary early childhood teacher, how many times do we tell children who've inadvertently hurt a friend's feelings, go say you're sorry? That's a perfect example of, like, that doesn't mean anything to a preschooler. They need a lesson in, when I hurt my friend's feelings or make a mistake or knock down, you know, one of their toys, I say, I'm very sorry, I did that. Here, let me help you. I will try to do better. Children are wired with the capacity for language, but the input to the software that's already there needs to be the actual language that you want them to use. So they need that role model. And they need it modeled not as a directive, like, you should do this. It's like, when I hurt my friend's feelings, this is what I say sometimes. It needs to be a modeled I message from the adult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, this is a time, they know a lot and they understand a lot, but they're still really trying to formulate their skills of expressing themselves. So expressing themselves is hard work. So we are coming back to that, getting in the car at the end of the day and asking how their day was. That's really hard work for them, to take their whole day and to funnel it and to get to a succinct place where they can share that with you. And And so we kind of expect that, but it's very hard for them. So just keep that in mind, especially for this age level.
Yeah, really good point.
Very good point. Let's go down to ask specific
Specific.
It is helpful to know a little bit, especially if your child goes to school or a childcare center or something like that at this age, to know kind of the routine of the day, maybe some of the activities in the day, so that you can ask specific questions. Because as Cassie said, that day was very big and very full of many, many things. There might be songs and friends and playing on the playground and doing an art activity and all of that. And so what we want to do as parents to help them to gather their thoughts or to remember, well, who did you play with on the playground today? Or if you know they like a particular child, did you play with Johnny today? When you were on the playground. So it's very, very specific and concrete, because that's how this child functions, and they need help with organizing and remembering all the things that they do know, because they do know lots of things.
And the research behind those specific questions are, again, get to know whether you come and observe their classroom by appointment or you talk to their child's teacher about, so tell me, what is this thing that you do called circle time? And could you tell me the names of some of the work that my child's doing? So once you say, did you do something called circle time where you sang some songs? That will jumpstart the conversation. Or did you work on something called the bank game with numbers? Oh, it's the specific sort of knowledge, the data that will jumpstart, as opposed to what did you do today in school? Doesn't work with a preschooler.
It's
It
not
doesn't work with an adult. I mean,
true.
you know, like if somebody says, tell me about your day today, you're going to tell them one or two things, not your whole day. I don't understand why we expect it of kids when we can't do it ourselves.
Really.
I'm going to try to go to the next one, because you know what, gang, it is 1:45. So we will just go flying through this. 6 to 12 years old. They're wondering, why is that? That's their question. So
This is a big time for them to talk a lot about their friendships. This is very important to them. They're going to come home a lot and talk about what someone did to them or what they didn't do to them, and not only their friendships, but their teachers as well. So they're going to bring that all to you. And so this is a really important time to be neutral and to listen and to acknowledge, and then to help them start problem solving, and always kind of talk to them about what their role was in the whole situation, and really focus on how they can do things differently or what they can do next time, instead of focusing on the other players of the story. Really keep the focus on them, because you can't change other people, you can only change yourself. And having these conversations at this early age is really important, to see that they create their own destiny, they create their own actions and their own character. So this is a great time to do that when they're coming to you with all this fairness and justice conversations, which will come at you often.
I noticed that Lorna, when Ellen came to Lorna saying she wanted to wear the blue dress, Lorna never asked her why. Maybe she had made a plan with a friend, and like there's probably lots of reason why, but really just never asking that. They'll ask you a lot, but the answer to why, if they can give it to you, may not really matter to the situation. It might not help the situation. And most likely they can't answer why.
And one way of getting why going, where you understand either their friends' motivations that happened to them or their motivation, that what they did to the friends, is tell me the story of what happened. You invite a child to tell a story, they will reveal the why. Well, my friend did this and that made me angry. So asking why is way too abstract, almost for any age child. Actually, there's management research that shows you don't even ask an adult why, because it's like, I don't know. But if you get them to tell the story, they get to see the emotions and the interconnections. The other thing about these questions is show some empathy. Oh, wow, that must have really made you angry. And at times it's important that we share our own authenticity. Like, something like that happened to me when I was playing soccer when I was your age. And so sharing some of ourselves keeps the conversation going because we're showing them that we can relate through empathy and we can relate through our own experience.
Mhm.
And another good strategy is when they are telling you the story, to ask them to tell it again, but from the other person's perspective.
That's
So
good.
I love that strategy. So, and that helps them because that's what we're trying to do is help our children understand differences, diversity, different perspectives, and that's how they gain empathy for other people.
I know we're running late, but I just want to tack one thing onto what Cassie just said. It was so important. At about 5 or 6 years old, even though preschool children know there are other human beings, they see them. It doesn't really dawn on them until they're about 5 or 6. It's like, whoa, there are other people in the universe that have needs that are different than my own. Now, how am I going to navigate this? I want to get my own needs met, and I want to do what I want to do, but I also live in community. Between 6 and 12 years old, they are really struggling with the balance between being themselves and empowering themselves and connecting with community, and they need a lot of help with that.
Absolutely.
And
I
the
have one
thing
more thing
is-
from Jean Paul. I just wanted to throw in here. Jean Paul says, yes, totally. Most kids remember or tell parents the most emotionally charged experience they remember as they remember it.
Yes, definitely. One of the ways I think as parents that we know our child has gotten into this plane of development is not necessarily that it's their 6th birthday, because humans don't work as neatly as that. But I always say you can tell when they start saying it's not fair.
Yep.
Right.
Fair, they reach that, and you need to, oh, okay, time for me to shift my thinking rather than responding to the it's not fair.
Right, right. Very good point. Let's go to the next one because here we go. 12 to 18. Their big question is, who am I and how do I relate to other people? And so let's just quickly go over this one. This is a teen with her dad.
So I like that picture because we talked about finding times to connect and relate. A lot of times with adolescents, they have a hard time face to face and having you look at them because they're going to feel judged, even though you're not judging them at all. And so doing activities together where you're side by side, you don't have eye contact, but you're able to still have conversations, that's going to serve you a lot better than trying to sit down across the table from your adolescent and having a conversation. And of course, don't take things personally. They are going to love you one day and hate you the next day. And they're having big emotions and their bodies are on fire. So they are going to be expressing that in all sorts of ways. So we've been talking about staying neutral this whole time, but this is where you really have to stay neutral. In your facial expressions, in your body expressions, they will look at you. You might look off to the side and they'll think, what was that? Why were you rolling your eyes at me? And you might say, I had something in my eye. So if you have adolescents, I'm sure you can all relate to that. But
I found with my teenage daughters, I couldn't say too often, I'm not asking you these questions to pry into your life or interrogate you. I'm asking these questions because I love you and care about you and want you to be safe. It's like, we need to express our intentions to adolescents. This is why I'm asking this, because I love you and I always want you to be safe. And I never want you to get hurt. I'm not trying to pry into your life because they immediately go there.
yeah. And adolescents, they're always talking to you, even though they might not be saying a word. So that's where the second bullet is really important, is really, really observe your child and what's going on with them. And they might be having a conversation with a friend on the phone, not that you're eavesdropping, but you might just hear a little tidbit or, what they're watching on TV or just off the cuff comments they're making. It's just really important that you just observe what's going on with them outside of themselves so that you can help direct a conversation that might need to happen.
And it's, you know, it's interesting with teenagers. Sometimes they will ask you questions to find out if you're going to react or not, or how you're going to respond. Again, with Ellen, at the time that she was a teenager, which was quite a number of years ago, tattoos were a big thing, you know, and everybody wanted to have tattoos. That was a huge thing. So she had a couple of them, and she was probably, by this time, she was probably about 18 or, you know, maybe even 19. And she came to me one day and she just looked at me and she said, you know, Mom, I'm thinking about having another tattoo. And I think I'll just have it right on my chest. And I said, oh, that's interesting. She said, yeah, I think it would look nice if it was just right here on my chest. I said, well, have you ever thought about that as you grow older, your body changes? Have you ever looked at your grandma's chest and neck? Have you ever looked at my chest and neck? Not quite the same as when I was 19. She says, huh. So she just didn't say too much and she walked away. And the next day she came to me and she said, out of the blue, she said, Mom, I've decided I'm not going to have a tattoo on my chest because I don't really think it'll look that great with a wedding gown, in a wedding gown. And I'm like, okay, good enough, you know? So, you know, it's just interesting what they come up with and what, you know, what they're looking for. And often it's really just to see how you are going to react.
And also don't hesitate to ask them. So if you're having a conversation with them, don't hesitate to say, do you want me to just listen? Do you need me to brainstorm with you? Do you need some advice? Do you want to hear what I did when I was your age? How can I support you, you know, during this situation and in this conversation?
Mm-hmm. And then the one other thing I want to say about teenagers, which I think is real important, we want to make sure that even though we are supportive of them, even though we are listening to them, we need to, in a kind and respectful way, at certain times in certain conversations, tell them what our values are. And just make sure they've heard that out loud, because they may be thinking about trying something that doesn't go with our values at all. And so it's a tricky kind of conversation to have, because you want them to stay with you and stay open to communication. On the other hand, you don't want to just be a soggy noodle about your values. I mean, they are your values, your family values, and teenagers are going to want to try interesting things sometimes, you know. And so be gentle, be respectful, but be clear about what it is that you believe.
I have a quick story, Lorna, that I just want to share with adolescents. The one thing too is you don't want to get a battle of, you know, don't make that face at me or lower your voice, or, you know, it becomes about that. Just know, again, they're going through so much. They're not that you should expect that, or not that you don't deserve respect, but pick your times in your battles. I had a friend, I was over at her house and her teenage girl came in and was kind of disrespectful or rude and was leaving to go do something. And I said, why don't you call her on that? Why didn't you say something to her? And she said, watch, she's going to come home from whatever she did. She's going to snuggle up to me, give me a hug. She said, I have to pick my times because I want her to be able to talk to me about the big things. Sure enough, she came home in about 2 hours, you know, came up, kissed her mom, cuddled up to her, told her she loved her, and bounced up the stairs. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So remember that you don't want to get into a battle about kind of how they're expressing their emotions. You do want to have boundaries, but you also want to make sure that you are understanding of that, what they're going through at that time.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up now. In summary, these are just a few of the points that we've made, so this is not all comprehensive here. Ask open-ended questions. You don't need to be the fixer. Questions and approaches change as children grow and become better communicators and go through the different stages in their development. Be honest about your values, but not overly emotional. And so We hope that this has been a great presentation for all of you. We will be back next week with another good presentation for you. Look for those reminders in your emails to find out what it's going to be. We're going to be talking about how to help children through conflicts. Conflict is part of our lives, and so that will be our next conversation next week. So join us again then. Thanks for coming today. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week. Okay.